Hey there, and welcome to this week's From the Vault episode from the Magdalen House podcast. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and known affectionately by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we bring you a new release. In our From the Vault episodes, we share past podcast releases from our 3 different podcast series, Recover Ed, Recovered Interviews with Alcoholics, and Hope for the Family. Our podcasts aim to connect, inspire, and educate alcoholics, loved ones, and the community to the Magdalen House and the services we offer. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everyone. Today we are doing our podcast series. We're recording our podcast series, Recovered Interviews with Alcoholic Women. So if this is your first time on here, once a week in substitution of our check-ins, we hold an interview with a recovered alcoholic. This is your opportunity to be able to ask questions, anything that you want to ask that you don't get to ask in meetings. You can ask about steps, you can ask about experience, you can ask about anything that you want. If you do not have any questions, that is fine too. I always come prepared. Not prepared. I ask a lot of questions. So now I get to introduce our guest, and I'm so excited, y'all. And I know you all are very excited too. If you know Carolyn, to know Carolyn is to love Carolyn. And she has been with me pretty much since day one. We first met when I first started at Maggie's and was getting ready to take over Next Step. And I think we met one time in the house before COVID happened. And so she has been on with this interview since before it was a podcast. She was on the very first one as a listener. So she's heard them, she's done them. I know that this is going to be filled with like wisdom and fun and joy. And it's just because that's what Carolyn is. And I'm just so excited. So Carolyn, if you could just start off with a little bit of background information about yourself to qualify yourself for the women and what led you to get sober this time.
Well, I thank you, Stephanie. I hope it's good now that you've said that. But one thing I always do before I share anything is, and thank you for the long silence. It gave me an opportunity to pray. Sometimes people do it for 1 second. And you're like, whoa, I'm still praying. And I always ask God for me to share what he would like me to share and to take my ego and pride out of it and to humble me. So, yeah, I qualified the first time I took a drink at the age of 13. And that I'm not going to get into my drunk log because I don't have, I'm just going to talk for 15, 20 minutes, whatever Stephanie said. And I see some of my sponsees on here and they know I talk a lot. So I always drank alcoholically. I don't think I ever didn't drink alcoholically. And that carried through high school. My early 20s, I was drunk when I met my husband. I was drunk at my wedding. I woke up afterwards. What the hell did I do? I just married this man that I've only known for 6 months. I am to tell you that I'm still married to him 29 years later. So, that is a good thing. But when we moved to Waxahachie, my husband thought that being in a dry county, that was going to control my drinking. Well, us as alcoholics, we know that we will find it anywhere. We just stock up a little bit heavier so we don't have to drive as far. In 1996, and it was actually on this last Sunday, March 28th, was when I first got sober. And I'm not going to get in the details of that, but it was a total God deal, how the events that happened that day and how I ended up in treatment. There's not too many places like Maggie's. When we walk into Maggie's, we have already done our step one. We, have to be willing to go in. No one can put us in there. Well, I had a court order, handcuffed, and had some police officers take me to treatment. And so I remember fighting it. I wasn't letting go of this. I wasn't going to admit I was an alcoholic. And I didn't know anything about the disease or anything. I'd never been subject to it. And the next day, I'll never forget the day I surrendered. And later on, I found out that at that same time, my husband and a preacher were praying that I would, put myself in there voluntarily. And I share this sobriety because there's a great lesson from being sober a long time and relapsing. It's not that, oh, I had 20 years and look at me. It's, oh, I had 20 years and I rested on my laurels and I thought I knew what I was doing and I thought I knew everything. And the book talks about us relapsing and it's 100 times worse. My first 12 years of sobriety were awesome. My husband and I were trusted servants. We were GSR. We spoke all over the Metroplex. And I had my son in sobriety and he went to meetings with me, grew up in the group. And then around when he was 5, there was a lot of cussing and I didn't want him to repeat it. And I started being the PTO mom and started being the church mom and started doing all these things. And prior to that, I will tell you that in 1 year, I lost my mom, my dad, and my mother in 1 year. And I was 12 years sober and I didn't drink and I didn't want to drink and I was not mad at God. And that is practicing the principles in the program, because that was a very, very hard time for me, because it was also right when I had my son. So I have this joy and I have this horrible thing, So when I became PTO mom, a church going mom and all that, I didn't go to meetings for 8 years. And the day I picked up a drink, nothing wrong was in my life. I had a wonderful life. But the thing is, I forgot I was an alcoholic. And I wasn't growing my spiritual life. And I was on a business trip and I walked up to the bar and I ordered a gin and tonic and I drank it. And I went back to my hotel room and I didn't drink for 6 months. So then the mental obsession kicked in and it said, you know what? You can drink like a normal person now. You got this. And I was out for 3 years. I got another DWI. I was extremely physically sick, mentally sick, spiritually sick, and I could not get sober. As the book talks about and how it works, half measures availed us nothing. That's what I was doing. I was like, oh, I'll just go back to meetings. I know what to do. Well, that wouldn't keep me sober. I'd walk out of there going, God, they made me drink. I would immediately get in the car and start drinking. So I got this DWI. My business was going bad. I mean, I was affecting my employees, my customers. I was teaching classes in a blackout. Now it's starting to, my son, who didn't see me drink for 15 years, is like, what the heck is going on? And I went to Maggie's in 2018 and things were bad, really bad. But guess what? Not bad enough. That set aside prayer they give you inside Maggie's, that is why I'm sober today. I will honestly tell you that is why I'm sober today. Because when I went through in 2018 and I really wanted to get sober, and I did get sober and I stayed sober for 14 months. But the problem was that I didn't do what the book suggests. I didn't work with others. I didn't practice the principles in all my affairs. And I was picking and choosing what, the steps like a buffet. And so, I knew I was going to drink before I drank. I will never forget that mental obsession was a passenger in my car. And I talked to it the whole way to this women's retreat, an art retreat that I put on. This is how bad it was. I was like, I stopped at Rice on my way and I picked up a big bottle of vodka for the weekend. And then I picked up a fifth. I think that's what it is, a smaller one, so that the minute, because I had a blower on my car, so I couldn't drink while I was in the car. So when I got there, I was going to drink that. And when I pulled up, I guzzled that whole fifth of vodka and did not realize it hit me within 2 hours. And my friends that drink, who love me to death, knew that I didn't drink like them. And they immediately took my keys, looked in my car, poured whatever out, called my husband. And this is what happened. When I got home, I wasn't going to tell my husband. I didn't know how I was going to handle it. I was like, well, maybe I won't tell Maggie's and I'll tell my home group, and that's where the dishonesty and everything starts coming in. And so that was in December. I actually went to El Salvador for Christmas and my sister's birthday, and I was going to drink, and I drank. And the day after I got back, I had to overnight on New Year's Eve, and I I honestly, it wasn't so much that I wanted to call and tell them I couldn't because I relapsed. I was afraid because Rachel didn't have anyone for New Year's Eve and I didn't want to let them down. So I had this battle going on with me. So I did overnight. And this is how humorous God is. The next morning, I always pull a stick with you girls. And I pulled integrity. Yeah. And that tore me up that day. And I said, screw this. And I drank for the whole month of January, all the way to February 20th. In that time, I had blown dirty in my thing. So I was going to, because the judge told me one time, you're going to jail for an entire year. And at this point, my son told me I was an F drunk, and that he no longer wanted to live with me because I was the mom that showed up on the football field drunk. Okay. And we live in a small town and my son didn't have anyone to talk to. So he talked to parents of his friends, the coaches. So everyone knew that Carolyn was a drunk, and all my customers knew, and I was just getting to the point. I thought that I was that person constitutionally incapable in the book. My sponsor tells me that I am not that lucky and to stop that. And so 3 days before I went back to Maggie's, my son moved out. My husband allowed it because he didn't want to live with a drunk mom. And mind you, this is his senior year that I vowed I would, be this perfect mom since I've been a drunk the 3 years prior to in his high school. So we went to go live with a friend and their parents, who of course knew I was an alcoholic. And then my husband decided to move out. Now, people that don't know us would think, why can't she get drunk? Her family just left her. Do you want to know what my thought was? Thank God I don't have to hide the alcohol anymore. Get the hell out of the house. Because my husband did ask me to leave. And I'm like, hell no, I'm not leaving. This is my house, So they left and I went on a 3-day binge. And I can't tell you if it was morning or night. I remember waking up at night and thinking it was 7 o'clock in the morning, it was 7 o'clock at night. And I just kept drinking to black out. I was done. And I would pray and pray and pray to God, please kill me, please kill me. I even prayed for him to let my cancer come back. Just put me out of my misery like a sick dog, So that one night I called my manager at work and I said, I need you to take me to Maggie's tomorrow. I can't, I'm dying. And she said, I'll be there in the morning. And I called Rachel and I said, please tell me there's a bed. I said, I can't do this. I have to come back to Maggie's because I didn't know what else to do. But I can honestly tell you that my thought process at that time was going back to Maggie's was not going to get me sober, that I was just doomed. So that morning, I drank whatever was left and I called Rachel and I screamed and my manager came and picked me up. I mean, I remember calling her, are you here yet? Because she lives in Plano. And I'm like, are you here yet? Are you here yet? Because I was already thinking about taking a taxi or an Uber to the liquor store. Did I have enough time to do that before she got here? And I think back on this, I'm like, oh my God, normal people don't think this way. And so I ended up, she came and got me. She took me to Maggie's. I was a belligerent butt. Rachel was asking me if I could keep certain people on my list for phone calls. And I was like, take them off. And I was like, take my husband off. He's a piece of crap. And my manager finally looked at her and said, just put my name down for an emergency. Okay. And it was the worst detox I've had since. I stayed in that bed for 24 hours. There was actually 2 other girls with me. We all came in that day and the only time we left the room was to smoke a cigarette. We didn't eat. That room stunk. All I remember is every time I came to, I was back in reality and I cried and cried and cried because I had absolutely no hope. And that's crazy sounding because I'm inside Maggie's, but I had no hope. And all I could do was say, please. That's all I could tell God, please. And I would pass out again. I'd wake up again. And I did this until the next day. And then I was like, there's nothing else to do. I got to get a hold of my sponsor. My sponsor has to come see me. And thank God we weren't in COVID. And she came to me and she said, because she'd already worked with me for a year and a half. And she said, I think you need to pray if you need to find another sponsor. And my thought, because she thought it was going to be too easy for me to go back to her. Well, if anyone knows my sponsor, there's nothing easy about her. Okay. And that's why I picked her in the beginning, because I didn't want someone I could manipulate, because I knew the AA lingo and I knew that I could be dishonest. And so I told her, and I was crying, and I'm like, I actually thought about getting another sponsor when I came in, because I thought that would be easier. But my dishonesty, how I can manipulate, me. And I said, so I don't need to pray about it, but I will pray about it. And so we started this journey again. I love that woman. She still puts me in my place, and she'll still tell me how selfish I am. But you know what? I stay humble, and I practice the principles with her guidance. So that's kind of what happened, how it is today, real quick. I love my life. I've only been sober a year, but it's better than the 20 years I had, and like I said, that set aside prayer is what saved my life. Because and even my sponsor, she's not allowed to say, well, you were in the program. I always tell her, no, I don't know, because I relapsed. I don't disregard those 20 years, because I did have good sobriety and stuff, but I think I carried my book around for 20 years, and I didn't know the book like I know today. I love the book. We used to make fun of people. Oh, they're a big book thumper. Well, you know what? I'm a big book thumper. And I know that book. I live by that book. If it's not in the book, like I have my sponsors sometimes call me and say, hey, these girls are doing da 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 da. Am I doing the 10th step wrong, or am I doing this step wrong? I'm like, show me where it is in the book. I think there's things that we can do to enhance, our recovery, or, but if it's something that's not in the book that doesn't sound right, like I'm even old school. I make them, they're not allowed to use a chart, a checkoff list on the 4 step. They have to, do it from the book. And it's not me. It's the way my sponsor took me through the step. I work with other people. And this is a part I was going to tell you, Stephanie, about an amends, because I know how much you love your amends. I work with other people not because I know something. Okay. I work with other people because I need to learn something. I have several girls that are on their amends right now. And, when I go through the book with them and I work with them, and I'm like, I can't do this if I'm not doing it. And the first time around, I had an amend that I was so angry. I told my sponsor, I said, I'm not willing to do it. And she said, that's fine. Just keep praying for the willingness to do it. When I relapsed this time, I became willing, but I still wasn't able to do it. Well, last week, I was like, holy cow, this is too much in my face. And so I'm having coffee with someone that I owe an amend that I've known I've needed to make for, over 2 years. And that's why I work with other people. I heard Caroline say that step 12 is non-negotiable. And I scream it at the rooftops. When I got out of Maggie's the first time, I would sit in meetings and I'd be like, please don't ask me. Please don't ask me. And then I remember in next step, I don't know if Stephanie still asks us questions. Are you a sponsor yet? And I'm like, no. And she's like, are you putting your name in the chat? I said, I swear I'm putting my name in the chat. I tell in meetings, I said, nobody wants what I have. I had to call my sponsor. I'm like, I don't know. When I go to next step, I feel like I'm doing something wrong, because I don't. And she said, the 12 step doesn't say you sponsor people. It says you carry the message. And she said, you're carrying the message by overnighting. You're carrying the message by sharing in the meetings. You're carrying the message by cheering. And you're carrying the message. I carry the message to a treatment center here in town. So my life is so good, and the funny thing about it, financially, I have no financial insecurities, which I probably should, because I'm in COVID and my business is in bad shape. There's a lot of stuff going on, but you know what? I just keep doing what God wants me to do. And it's like, people ask me, how's your business doing? I'm like, not very good, but I laugh about it because there's nothing I can do about it today. So why should I let that ruin my day? Back to my son and I have the best relationship today. When I was in Maggie's, he did not want to speak to me. He hated AA. He thought AA was a cult. They're full of it. You keep going back and you keep drinking. And this is why I love Next Step. And I'm probably going all over the board, but I'll tell you this real quick and then I'll finish. Is because we get out of Maggie's and we're so willing when we go in because we're so desperate, and we get out of Maggie's, and the true test is how willing am I to pick up the phone and call Stephanie. And I've had people that I'm like, why haven't you called Next Step yet? Why haven't you called Next Step? And it's that willingness. And then you go into Next Step and you do what they suggest. And one of them was I had to call someone who was on this list that I didn't know. Well, apparently Stephanie says I didn't hear that part of the assignment. I was going to call Marguerite because I knew Marguerite. And Marguerite didn't call me back. And I really, really wanted to call Tina. And so, because she had a son in the same age, and I wanted to know how she did it and how her relationship was today. And so that phone was 100 pounds, and I was like, oh, all day I kept looking, I got to call Tina. So I finally called Tina up, and Tina and I are best friends now. I love that woman to death. And it's funny because her wife is best friends with my husband and family support. And I called her up and I talked to her, and you know what she told me? She says, that is his story and you're to leave it alone. You need to work the steps and you need to work your program and just let him be. And so when I went to go make an amend to him, I said, honey, I didn't do it right away because I needed to make a living amend, because it was like every time I came back, I'm sorry, And so I told him one day, it just happened to be the right time. And I said, during my drinking, the things that I said to you, the things that I did to you were so wrong on so many levels, and all I can do is make up for it, as a living amend. I said, but you have every right to be angry with me. And, if you're not okay, with me and still angry, you just keep on. That's fine. I don't have the right to expect you to forgive me today and things to go back to the way they were. So I just want you to know that I was terribly wrong in the things I said and did. So is that kind of what you wanted?
Perfect. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions before I dive in? Okay. So I'm so glad that you mentioned your husband, because I know that he's super active in family support, but I also know that you guys drank together and then got sober together or something like that. Do you mind talking about your relationship and how it's like, because it's so obvious that you two are like still so in love. It is like the most beautiful freaking thing. I don't know if you ever hear the way your husband talks about you.
Yes.
Oh my God, my heart. So I'm sure it hasn't always been that way, with two alcoholics and everything. So can you talk about that and how the program has really like save your marriage is the right word, but is working in your marriage?
Yeah. So when I got out of treatment the first time and I went to AA, that first meeting, I was like, I'm home. I found my people, and my husband was kind of feeling left out, and he had started going to Al-Anon, because he was the worst Al-Anon. He's, and when we relapsed after 20 years, oh God, yeah, he did everything they told him not to do. So he kept sitting there in the meetings talking, because we get better. And it's funny you say this, because I do a meeting with Cindy and my sponsor on Wednesday night in White Rock, and we're studying To the Wives. And it's really been good to see the other side and how we're so parallel, And so he just wanted to drink. And I guess he talked about it in the Al-Anon meeting. And so they told him to go get over in the other room. So I'll tell you, when he came in and got a desire chip, I was pissed. I looked at my sponsor and I said, he is in my meetings. And she said, sweetie, these aren't your meetings. And I'm like, well, he's not an alcoholic. And she said, it's not for you to say who is and who isn't. And what's the worst thing? He doesn't drink and work a 12-step program. So we started this journey together, and I had gone back out before him, and it was a camping trip. I will say he's not the level alcoholic I am, but he gets his butt back in before he goes down as far as I do. And so I will tell you that we have had to work separate we don't work each other's programs. We practice the principles in our household and with our son. And we also have the respect to, as he's working with people and I'm working with people, that's important to us and not to put a guilt trip on. But when we relapsed after 20 years and I got bad so fast, he went back. He actually just celebrated 4 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he went back a long time ago. And our house was hell because he was working a program and I wasn't. I remember coming downstairs and him and another guy on the floor doing the third step prayer, and I was drunk off my ass. And excuse my language, I'm sorry, Stephanie. He would say, do you want to go to an AA meeting? And I'm like, no. And he would come home and say, oh, Donna said hi and Hilda said hi. And I'm like, so it wasn't good because it was in my face the whole time, but I wasn't ready to stop drinking. This time around, so he got really involved in Al-Anon the last 3 years. And then, of course, he jumped on family support, which I am so happy because not that they needed a guy. They need everyone on there, but they really needed a guy because if you think about it, it's women going into Maggie's. And so it's the husbands and boyfriends getting on family support. I feel blessed I get to share Maggie's because it is all women, but I do get to share with him. He knows a lot more than I do because he will come to me and be like, oh, have you talked to Chloe? Da, da, da. And I'm like, no, I didn't know about that. Tina is his best cheerleader. She's the one who told Lisa, you better get him as a leader on there. And she'll text me and say, oh, I love what he wrote on the Facebook post. And I'm like, what? I don't know. And that's us keeping it separate because we work our program, we do things in our house together. We go to some meetings together. We'll do some stuff, but we don't get into each other's program. And if we do, one of us will fire back, thanks for doing my inventory. So it can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions or anybody have any questions? Okay.
I don't have a question, but Carolyn, I am so grateful to find out now that we share the same humility prayer because that is absolutely my favorite. And that absolutely brings me back to square one. Hey, girl, get it together. You don't know anything about everything. So, or vice versa. It's just my favorite. It puts me right back in my place. So I did not know that. You've been holding out on me, girl.
I'm sorry.
No, I think it's beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Angie.
Thank you. I wanted to say that is also my prayer. That's the first thing I do. And I say it all day long. And I do appreciate that you have a son because I have to face that here real soon. And my son is like the hardest on me. And he's like, my middle child. And he's just so hard on me, so I appreciate that. And I might have to call you for some questions or advice if that's okay.
You call me anytime because, that was the hardest thing for me. It wasn't that I didn't love my son, but I couldn't stop drinking, and unless you're an alcoholic, you understand that, And so when I got sober, I would think of all the things I did and said to him. And my son is the most amazing man, and it is not by me. He will sit down and pray with you. He's just such an awesome boy. I really damaged him. And so the guilt and everything. And so when Stephanie would have these interview with the drunks and I knew they had kids, I was like, that was my question. How is it today? Because I needed some hope. And I know Lisa's on here and I don't, Lisa has seen these promises come true with her kids. And so I'm going to tell you what I was told. That is their story. And you can't change that story. The only thing you can do is make a living amend and do things differently. But we really have to let them see us. It's not in our time without even me. I mean, this is like, I don't invite him to meetings. I don't do anything. It just happened. I gave it to God and I stopped worrying about it and I stopped doing everything. And my son asked if anyone knows about college football, it's big time. Like, you don't ask the coach to come home. Okay. Like, and they're in spring ball right now. And he told and I told him, don't do it, and he told the coach that this was very important. And I'm sure they've had talks about my drinking. And the coach just said, that's a big deal. You can go down, but your butt better be here at 8 a.m. So he drove all the way down from Oklahoma to give me my 1-year chip and give his father his 4-year chip. And the things he said, it was all by the grace of God, without me and Michelle even knowing. Apparently her daughter and my son had a little spark going on. And so they are like glued at the hip now. And they're actually looking at starting an Alateen at our group. This is a boy that thought A was bull. And he even supports, we have a guy who can't even stay sober, and he keeps coming to the meetings drunk, and he's having a really hard time. And Denton just walks in and gives him a big hug and just says, Greg, I've been praying for you. I mean, like, who is this child? I had to get out of the way, And so, Angie, it will happen. You just keep doing what God wants you to do and practice these principles in all your affairs. And one day your heartache is going to be an asset, and you're going to be able to help another woman.
Thank you.
So beautiful. Anyone?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. Carolyn, I love you so much. It's kind of a two-part question. One, I know that myself and I think a couple of the girls on here are getting ready to start sponsoring. And so for me, anyways, there's definitely some anxiety with that, right? It feels like a huge responsibility. So if you could talk about that. And then also, how do you deal with, like, do you ever suffer from like burnout, like being overwhelmed or like exhausted with it? Like how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the anxiety of getting started? And how do you deal with maybe once you get so busy, how do you manage all that? If you could speak to that. Thank you.
That's actually a really, really good question, because once again, I don't know nothing. So I take the girls through, and I had a sponsor call me just like, oh, no one wants what I have. And I'm like, you better watch out, because then you're going to have like 10 girls and be going, what the heck do I do? So everything you said has happened to me. Okay. Because it's like, oh my God, you feel, but the thing is that all we're doing is taking someone through the steps as we were taken through the steps. One thing I started doing immediately is, even if it was a phone number I didn't recognize, no matter what, I answered it, because I needed to be available for them. Because I hear a lot of women say that their sponsors don't call them back and stuff. And so if I'm busy, I will send a text message. My girls know to text 911 if I need to talk to them right away. So yes, I was scared to death. And that's why I have a sponsor. And even today, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I had to call her about someone, because I don't know everything. If I act like I know everything and just keep on going, I may take someone through the book the wrong way. And so as long as I keep the attitude that I don't know, and then I'm just going to take you through the steps as I was taken. And if I'm uncertain about something, I call and I process it with my sponsor, And so this is a funny thing that you talk about. I had 2 girls that just couldn't stay sober. And I was really getting frustrated. And I was like, because then I had other girls that really wanted this. And I'm like, so I called my sponsor. Well, come to find out, my sponsor had a little problem with one of hers, and she had to call Cindy. So it kind of trickled down to me, and I got the direction I needed. I always go to my sponsor about it. Now, the question about, do I get burnt out? I found myself one day feeling that way, and that wasn't right. That was selfish of me. So I called my sponsor, and this was what Cindy had told her. You don't allow your sponsees to dictate when and how you're going to sponsor them. Okay. So if you say, we have an appointment today to do your 5th step, and they call, or they're late, or they change it, or whatever. So with having a lot of girls call me, I found myself feeling overwhelmed. And so I tell them kind of what my day is. And I kind of say, call me at this time, or I'll work with you at this time. And if they don't, then I can't do it, because then if I'm moving other things around in order to fit them in, it's not fair to the other girls. So they'll just have to go at the end of, and I don't know if that kind of answers it, but now I set boundaries and I set times, and it works well because, like what my sponsor said, if you don't give them a time and then all of a sudden they call and say something, whose fault is that? She always points it back at me. And it's true. I can't be mad at the other person if I didn't give them direction and say, hey, we're doing your 5th step today. You know, if I just leave it out there, then it's my fault, you know. So they can call me anytime, but if we're doing step work or we're doing something, we set a time, and that's when we do it. So like I had a girl call last night, and she was wanting to do this step work, and I had to work with someone else, and I'm like, no, you know, we'll set a time for this for tomorrow evening, you know. So that's kind of how I do it. You know, again, I'm just like, I rely on God to make it happen, you know. But I got to tell you, do not let your fear keep you from sponsoring people, because that's how you're going to stay sober. I cannot tell you the blessings. Oh my God, the blessings. I love the girls that I sponsor. Several of them are on here. I'm not going to say who, but one called me with some great news last night, and I got chills seeing her grow in this program. Another one called me about something that happened with her daughter. I mean, I just wanted to cry, you know. And Harriet told me a long time ago, a true spiritual experience is when you see another woman work with another woman. And I'm seeing that today. And she was scared to death working with someone. And she called me up and she's like, oh my God, what do I do? I said, this is what I, you know, let's go back to what I did with you, you know. And she's seeing the miracles today of working with someone. So do not shy away from working with other people. Put your name in the chat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great question. And Carolyn is such a good person to speak on that, because I do remember in Next Step, be like, well, what are you doing to make yourself available? Are you sharing in meetings? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And Carolyn is such a great example. I mean, the amount of women that you help today is just amazing. And you've always been that, which is kind of makes me want to ask something else. Whether you were sponsoring or not, you've always been helpful. And one of the ways that you always have been helpful is, as the ladies know, you get a buddy each week. Mm-hmm. And it never failed that if I had a new woman or a woman who was like shy and who needed to be pulled in, I always put her with Carolyn. And if you guys know Carolyn, you know why that would make sense. And so she's developed a lot of strong friendships that I've also gotten to see over this last year. And so I would just love if you could speak to the fellowship piece and the sisterhood of this program, if you don't mind.
No, not at all. It's huge. It really is, because you know, we come into the program and the first thing is, oh my God, I can never drink again. My life is over. You know, my life today, I have friends in the program. I have friends out of the program. I can go out dancing and not be, you know, tempted to drink. I can go to a wedding. I can, you know, anything. But no one and I, our home group, get involved with your home group, especially if they're in person. My home group, oh my God, I love them. And actually some of the Maggie girls have made it their home group. We have a 7:30 meeting in the morning that is so awesome. It's like a family, you know. We're just now starting to, you know, we can't do really events or anything. And I know Maggie's can't do events, but Sandra's been doing a lot of stuff, you know, because then it's up to you whether, you know, you're vaccine, COVID, whatever, but we still have to be careful within our group and within Maggie's. But you know, when I got out of Maggie's the first time, and I was a backup overnight person, and I didn't feel a part of, you know, I was like, God, they don't make me feel a part of. Well, guess what? I didn't make myself feel a part of, you know. Today, I am all up in it because I love it. I love the women up there. I love overnighting. If you guys if you guys truly want to give back and get sponsees overnight, because the girls they want to know the personality, and I know some people just say, hey, I'm going to be your sponsor or whatever. I don't do that because I feel like I don't want to put someone, especially if they're in their first 24 hours, I don't want them to feel like, oh my God, I always tell them, listen for a couple days, listen to the women on the Zoom meetings, listen to the chair people, talk to the overnight people. And then if they're new, I'll give them my number or say, hey, it's on the list, and a couple times people have said they've done that and then they've called me, because they got to know me when I overnighted. One event or one fellowship that I've really immersed myself in is the Maggie's Women's Group, which is a lot of alumni. You don't see them as much on Zoom meetings and stuff, but I got to be a part of the cookbook. Who wouldn't love to work with Sandra and JoJo? They are a hot mess. I love them. Now this year I've worked with Patty with events, and next year she's moving up to president and I'm going to be the events chair. And I love to do stuff for the ladies in the house. But, Stephanie's right, getting to know people, the accountability partners are so big. And I got to tell you, Stephanie, I don't know if I ever told you this, but this is how selfish I am. I thought, God, can't she give me someone that'll call me? I want someone to call me and ask me how I'm doing. But you know what? That's not what it was for. She needed someone to pull them out of their skin. And if you are that person that is a strong buddy person, let me just share something real quick, how important this is. I had a girl and I met her because we only had one meeting at the house for Next Step. She was my buddy for several weeks because we didn't change it out at first every week until they got more people. And she was very, very shy, but she was very, very willing. And Stephanie probably knows who I'm talking about. She was very overwhelmed. Her kids had been taken away. She had to see the judge every week. She was doing Next Step. She was having to work, having to do meetings. And she was at the end of phase 1 and I was still her buddy. And she called me, which was a shocker. I was the one who called, but we did text and stuff. And she was ready to quit Next Step. And I don't know if Stephanie knows this. She was going to quit because she had to present on 1, 2, 3. She was already in the future about having to shadow someone and chair a meeting. Her court stuff, her just everything. And we talked and I'm like, sweetie, let's just talk about today. Forget about phase 2 or any of that stuff. Let's just talk about today. Let's talk about presenting 1, 2, 3. It's only got to be 5 minutes. And my greatest advice on shadowing someone or presenting a Next Step, when all else fails, read. You cannot screw up if you read. And so we went through it. And when she graduated for Next Step, I was bawling like a baby. I get chills right now thinking about it because she was sitting in her brand new house with her brand new bed behind her. I noticed that brand new bed, and she had her kids back and she was sober and she finished Next Step. So you never know when you can be a service to someone that may be thinking of quitting. Accountability and fellowship is so, so important.
Yes.
Does that answer? I go off on a beaten path.
No, I love it so much though, because I do know exactly who you were talking about, and you were the perfect person to put her with, and she's still doing great.
I know. I love it.
I know. And I do remember that conversation that we had about how nobody calls you. And I just said, well,
how selfish of me.
I mean, I get it, right? We all want to, and that's what I tell them. Who doesn't want to know that they're being thought of, right? Like, who doesn't want that, Like, nobody's ever going to be like, God, you're thinking of me? Stop. Like, I love that still. So, yes, thank you, Carolyn. Does anybody have a question before we get to the top of the hour? Lisa?
Hi, Carolyn.
Hi.
I just love how you said determination the lady had to get her son back, because I remember when I lost my son and I tried so hard. They put me in a program, and it just tells you AA really works. It does. And fellowshipping with other women or in a group like what I'm doing today and next step and with you. I had so much joy. I have a lot of joy today, and I'm staying sober and I love it, you know? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. There's Tamara. Go ahead.
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing everything. You know, this kind of goes back to earlier, but you were talking about your son, you know, and how you just have to give space. You know, I've been having to do that I have 3 kids, and my younger ones, they're in a different place than my oldest one is because she saw more. But like, I've just been sending her, you know, messages every day. For the first time in almost 3 months, she finally texted me back yesterday. I mean, when I go in town to see her, she's forced to like talk to me, but you know, it's so nice to hear, you know, that I do have to just sit back because I'm so anxious, and the old me just wants to make things happen and control the whole situation and stuff. But also, you were talking about your husband and how you guys were active in drinking together. You know, I have 2 ex-husbands, and my most recent one, Jacob, he, you know, he left me and divorced me, although, you know, because I wanted to divorce him too. I mean, you know, the ridiculousness of alcohol and self. But so right now we're still talking, and he still drinks. And, you know, I'm supposed to be moving on to phase 3, and my sponsor right now is very adamant about me, you know, really thinking. She's trying, you know, she's telling me that I need to let go of some resentments or let go of some things in my life and be willing. And I would just wanted to ask you, how is it that, did it work with you and your husband? Did you just, I know you said he left, but did you let go of everybody for a while? And I mean, how did you go about that, and how did you get through it?
Honestly, I think my husband, because he came back the day I decided to go to Maggie's. I think it was his little, like, you know, control thing, but I'm not going to do his inventory. But I will say that before I left Maggie's, I was very, very open to going to sober living. I have a beautiful house. I have my businesses in town, but my sobriety was more important if I was going to come home to the family dynamics. So I was very open to sober living, and I was still very, very angry with him because there was a lot of anger of him and Denton. I at the time felt like he was turning Denton against me. Well, when we do our 5th step, we get to see that those first 2 columns are in the past. We don't talk about that. We need to only be focused on that 4th column. Well, you know, I was drinking, you know, I mean, my house was a turmoil. Of course that they were, you know, talking amongst themselves because I was a crazy drunk in the house, you know. I was very, very blessed that when I came home, I needed to come home and assess. And then I knew that I could go to sober living. And then COVID happened. So God kind of took care of it for myself. And I was also very blessed that my husband took a totally, you know, back seat and let me do what I needed to do for my recovery, because it wasn't until I did my 5th step and I revealed things to my sponsor, not things that were, you know, I got to look and see where all my anger towards him was all about me. But I also revealed something that I had been harboring for a while. And it wasn't a resentment, but it was a feeling. And it was a feeling that wasn't honest. You know, that's when we started coming together. But I had to see my mistakes first, you know. Mm-hmm. And when I got sober the first time, and he'll tell you this in his story, I came home and I didn't think I wanted to be married anymore. And you hear in the program that you no major decisions the first year. Well, I was told I couldn't divorce him the first year. And I was told this time I couldn't divorce him the first year. And so that's how I handled it. And on your other question with your daughter, I'm going to give you a suggestion. Call Lisa. She has a great experience about what you just said about your daughter, and she's on the other side of it, and it's amazing. So call her, and I'm sure Lisa won't mind sharing. I kind of put you out there, Lisa. I'm sorry.
I'm happy to do it.
Okay. Yeah, I got to hear about that on Sunday. It was awesome. So, okay. All right, everyone, it's time for the wrap-up question. Carolyn, I love you so much.
I love you too, sweetie.
If you could leave us with one takeaway, one piece of wisdom or whatever it is for either the girls who are on the call, the girls who are listening, what would that one takeaway you'd want to leave us with?
I have so many, but one that I'm really, really big on, and it goes back to that set aside prayer, is that in the house, when the girls pull humility, all of them go, I love humility. I strive for humility today. And the reason why is because when I'm humble, I'm willing. And if I'm willing, I'm teachable. And if I'm teachable, I can be open for what God wants me to see and do. That willingness and that humility has to stay with us at all times. It doesn't mean that we lose it. Of course, I'm going to lose it and be like, I was overnighting the other night and I pulled humility. And I was like, oh, maybe I need to check my motives today. And there were some things I needed to look at, but if I'm not willing, I'm not going to see it. It's going to be like, oh, I know everything. I think that the girls on here right now, you guys being part of Next Step, you making that willing decision when you got out of Maggie's is huge, and you doing, following through with your commitment with Next Step will make you such a better person in recovery, because we are on AA steroids when we're in Maggie's, and then we get out and we're like, oh my God, what do I do? And it teaches us how to be a part of Maggie's. It teaches us to be a part of a fellowship. It teaches us to get a fellow, our home group and be a part of, I am still, and I love, Lisa says this all the time, and it really hit home with me. I am a normal person. I like to do normal things, and I like to have a normal life. I drink abnormally, and in order for me to take care of that mental obsession and not drink, because drinking is just a symptom of our disease, I have to practice these principles in all my affairs. The book talks about us resting on our laurels, and I was amazed when I relapsed after 20 years, how all of a sudden, every single one of you were the problem again. And I was not to blame, and I was in self, and I was selfish, and I was this and that, and I didn't even see it happen, and so I'm not going to see those things creep up if I'm not working with others. And that's why, Stephanie says, oh, I help all these women. All these women are helping me, because me left with my mind is not my friend. It keeps me in the program and the principles. So if I had a takeaway, it would be continue to grow your spiritual program. 10th step isn't you doing a nightly review. That is step 11. 10th step is when something happens, you immediately pray about it and you call your sponsor, and I guess that's what my takeaway would be.
Awesome. Thank you, Carolyn. I loved Carolyn whenever you said you answer the phone, even if you didn't know the phone number, because that is so important, because it could be an alcoholic woman who needs help, or if it's a debt collector or something like that. The book tells me that I don't dodge my creditors anymore, and so I think that being able to answer the phone, even if you don't know the phone number, is freedom in itself. So
oh yeah,
thank you for saying that. So, well, you all have a wonderful day. I'm sure many of you have Carolyn's phone number already, but if you do not, I'm happy to give it to you. All right.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel honored.
Yes, it was so good. I was so excited.
We hope you've enjoyed this From the Vault re-release of the Magdalen House podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a new release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels by searching for the Magdalen House.